Hello, boys and girls, and welcome to the concession stand here on the KB Radio Network. I am your host, Kevin Reed, and this is the review of the sequel that was 50 years in the making. Yes, none other than The Exorcist Believer, which is currently out in theaters. This is the sixth, believe it or not, sixth installment in the Exorcist franchise. But The Exorcist Believer serves as a sequel to The Exorcist from 1973. This film stars Leslie Odom Jr. and Dow Jennifer Nettles and Ellen Burstyn. And this film was on my highly anticipated list this year. I was looking forward to this movie because I'm a huge, huge fan of the original of the 1973 The Exorcist. And when they initially announced this film, I was super excited because it was in the hands of David Gordon Green. And around that time, he was fresh off of making the remake, well, not the remake, the sequel to Halloween and continuing that franchise, even though the last two that he directed wasn't all that good. I didn't enjoy those as much as I enjoyed the first one he made. And that's when the announcement was made. So I was like, okay, if he brings that same energy that he brought to the Halloween franchise into the Exorcist franchise, we got a winner. Unbeknownst to all of us, that the next two Halloween films weren't that good. He couldn't land that plane. And so I got kind of skeptical leading up to this release, and my skepticism was correct. The plot to The Exorcist Believer, it follows a photographer played by Leslie Odom Jr., who must confront the evil when his daughter and her best friend are possessed. Yeah, I was disappointed with this entry. I wasn't super mad, I wasn't disappointed to the point like, oh, I'll never watch this again. That never came to my head. There are points in this film that I actually enjoyed, but for the most part, it was boring. That's my biggest negative with this film. I was bored to tears for the first, well, not the first. It started off good. I was like, okay, the first 15 minutes. I was like, okay, we kind of following the same blueprint as the 1973 film, and I'm like, okay, this is interesting, and we get to we leap ahead about 13 years from the events that took place in the opening scene. And now we have this young girl in a relationship with her father, who is Leslie Odom Jr. And it was a nice relationship that was built there. They really flushed that out, how they are, a single father and his preteen, well, teenage, because she's 13, a daughter, So that hit home with me. Well, not the single father part, but the father daughter thing. It hit home with me, So I'm like, okay, we're good. And then we go into the kids. She meets up with her best friend, and they come up missing. Now, I'm not spoiling anything. This is all in the trailer. So, yeah. But I'm not going to spoil this movie with this review. Anything I say is most likely in the trailer. And that's one of the problems. All the good stuff is in the trailer. It's everything else was like, it was boring. Now, after the kids come up missing and they return, it drags for about an hour, man. It felt like an hour. I don't know. This movie was only I think an hour and 40 minutes long, maybe a little longer, maybe 45, an hour 45 or something like that. But it felt like three. When I was sitting there watching it, it just drug in the middle. Now, once we get to the actual exorcism, towards the end of the film in the third act, business picks up. Business picked up. It got a little better. And then the ending was like they didn't know how to end the movie. They went everywhere and they didn't know how to end the movie. And now the exorcism scene, how they ended the exorcism was top notch. They should have killed the movie right there. They should have just rolled credits right there. It probably would have saved it, but the ending just didn't work for me. It was done in a cheesy, want to give a happy ending way. Uh, you didn't get that in the original. Now, like I said before, I know, or at least I knew we weren't going to get a carbon copy of the original, which I'm glad, do something different. And they did something different. But man, the original, it was nothing happy about the ending of that film. I mean, yeah, it was technically, Reagan survived and blah, blah, blah. But it just didn't work. This did not work. Another part that didn't work for me was Ellen Burstyn's character, who returns from the original after 50 years, reprising her role as Chris McNeil. She was just thrown in there, man. That was stunt casting. It was stunt casting in the highest degree, and it was nonsensical to me. Her character served no purpose whatsoever, none, and it didn't work. It did not work. Now, had they went another route with stunt casting, it probably would have worked better. But we didn't get that. Kinda. But it didn't it did not work. The other actors involved in this film, I enjoyed for the most part. Leslie Odom Jr. did a decent job. He plays a character who has lost his faith, after the death of his wife, and uh, is very layered. His character is very layered, and I really was impressed with his performance. He wasn't the best performance in this film, but he had it was a good performance. It was decent performance, and Leslie Odom Jr. is an outstanding actor, especially on Broadway. If you haven't seen Hamilton, you're missing out. He is a monster on stage. As far as film is concerned, uh, he was all right in Glass Onion, but here he was a little better. He was a little better. But he wasn't the greatest. Who the greatest was Ann Dow. Loved her in this role. She stole the movie. Ann Dow, if you haven't watched The Handmaid's Tale and countless other movies that she has popped up in, uh, she is a phenomenal actress. And her character, her backstory, her arc in this film is very, very well done. I think her character was the best real written character in the entire film. Um, and her performance on top of that just makes it that much better. And she stole the movie. She really stole the movie. Enjoyed her. The two young actresses who are the possessed young teens, portrayed by Lydia Jewett and Olivia Malcolm. What a performance by them. They did excellent. They did excellent. A good job. The flaws I have with this movie has nothing to do with them. I feel that their characters were underwritten, but what was given to them to do, they did a phenomenal job. I really, really am impressed by those two young ladies. Can't wait to see them grow in their craft, in the future. Think they have a bright future ahead. Honestly, this was good stuff from them. But I must say, my biggest positive with this film, and as you can see, I did this reverse. I normally go positive, negative, but I figured out in on a good note with this review because the film really, it really let me down. But they had some points that they hit on that were so good, it actually saved this film from being a failing grade film. And my biggest positive was how they tackled the faith issue or the religious issue that's going on. If going back to the 1973 film, it was heavily influenced by religion. Of course, we're dealing with exorcism, we're dealing with demons and whatnot. So, of course, we're going to touch in on religion. Um, I thought that in this climate, in the days, 2023 climate, that we weren't going to go there like hard as they did in the 1973 film. Now, don't get me wrong, this isn't a faith-based film. This 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 would not pop up on In Touch TV. No, this is not that. They didn't beat you over the head with, "Oh, you need to believe in God." It wasn't all that. But I respected how we got all, well, not all, but different forms of spirituality, different cultures coming together to help these young ladies. You had a Baptist pastor, you had a Pentecostal preacher, you had a Catholic priest, you had what you call those, a healer, with the roots and stuff, the root work healers. They had all that working together, and I thought that was such a strong message to send out, because at the end of the day, all of those different denominations were praying to the exact same God. And I respected that so much, because you don't see that in film. Hey, you don't see that in reality. you know Different denominations coming together for a cause, even though at the end of the day we're out for the same thing. And that was the basically the message that they were pushing here. And for that reason, that's what makes this movie special. That's what sets it apart from different exorcism films. And I really enjoyed that aspect of it. We didn't get much of it. That only happened in the exorcism portion of this movie, which only takes place for about 20 minutes. But that was enough. That was enough. We also have uh abortion issues that came up in here. They touched in on that, and I thought that was a powerful message as well. It was a lot of messages hidden. Well, not hidden, because it was in your face. But they were in this film that I wasn't expecting. That did catch me off guard. I was shocked and surprised by that. And I thought that they did a good job of displaying that form of religion, all religions coming together. And especially in this day and age, we need that message. Unfortunately, it was in The Exorcist Believer that a lot of people probably won't see, especially if you're religious. And so it is what it is. The film is not a blood fest, is not gory. I don't even I didn't check. I don't think this movie is rated R. If it is, um it's a soft R. It's not. I don't. I don't think there was. Well, yeah, it was R. It was R, because they had one death in here that was pretty brutal, and it was an assault in here that was pretty brutal and graphic as well. But the only for those two things is R. Anything else? Uh, I've heard more curse words in PG-13 films. There really wasn't much of that. Much of that. Uh, you know, there may have been two, possibly three scenes that actually had blood in it. Um, yeah, it wasn't gory. And don't get me wrong, it didn't need gore. Films don't need to be gory to be R or scary. It just tell a good story, and you got me hooked. You got me hooked. And so At the end of the day, I think this was an all right film. It definitely wasn't one of the best in the Exorcist franchise. I think it's better than part two, The Heretic. That was horrible. That movie was horrible. Now The Exorcist 3, it didn't touch that. And the original is no way it would touch that. But it was all right. That's basically what I said when I walked away from it. I'm like, it's all right. And I wanted more. I guess that's why I was disappointed with it. I just wanted more from it. But it didn't scare me at all. It was nothing frightening. No, that's a lie. There was one scene, and it was in the beginning, or maybe the start of the second act. I don't know. But anywho's, when Leslie Odom Jr. is talking to his daughter in her bedroom, and well, I was about to spoil, but anyway, yeah, it was one little thing that happened in the bedroom that kind of was like, whoa, I jumped. I actually jumped, and I was like, okay, this is gonna be fire. But from that moment on, for about 45 minutes to an hour, nothing happened. Nothing else happened in this movie, and I was like, oh, I had to slap myself to keep myself awake. It just got boring. Oh my god, it's so heartbreaking, but it's all right. It's an all right boring movie. It moved. It wasn't like boring standing in one spot. It was just boring moving. It was just going paint by numbers. We're gonna execute this scene, move on to the next. Execute this scene, move on to the next. It was that. It was formulaic and nothing that would really reinvent the wheel in the horror genre like the original did. But we've seen so many exorcism movies up to this point. It is really not much more you can do to 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 shock us or scare us. So you had that going against it as well. But at the end of the day, it was a decent film. Nothing that I would run to the theater to go see, but if you have time and nothing else better to do, I recommend you checking it out. The Exorcist Believer, directed by David Gordon Green, currently in theaters, gets a letter grade of a C. It was average. It was an average film. But, I will say this. I've seen a lot worse than this. So I would like to know, did you check out The Exorcist Believer this past weekend, or are you waiting for it to come on streaming, or are you like, I'm not going to see that? I would like to know. Email the show, kbradiopodcast@gmail.com. You can also look me up on all social media platforms. Just look up the KB Radio Network, as well as YouTube. Look for the KB Radio Network channel, subscribe, and like this video if you don't mind. Don't forget about the 5 stars, the reviews, and sharing this show. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, wherever you are currently listening to the concession stand here on the KB Radio Network. Thank you for joining me for this review of The Exorcist Believer, currently in a theater near you. Want you all to know that I love you. Continue to love everyone. And until we speak again, you all be blessed.